Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. Today's guest is Jasmin Hume, who is the founder and CEO of a company called Shiru, which is a company I've been watching for a while. They've been on my radar because they are interesting in a number of ways. One of them is they are building this massive database where they're identifying protein functionality, and they're using machine language and AI to work through and sift through the data and just accelerate ingredient development. They're doing it as a B2B company where they're basically developing these ingredients that would be used by large consumer-facing product developers, large CPG brands who need next-generation novel ingredients to help them build their plant-based meats or plant-based milks, and Shiru is helping to develop that. You know, large CPG brands do employ people in white lab coats, but they're generally working on recipes and product formulations. They're not really working on developing novel ingredients to make their plant-based meats. And so companies like Shiru, I think, are going to become increasingly important as this market develops, as it becomes more mature. And so we talk about that with Jasmin and where she sees the company going. It's a really interesting conversation, so I hope you enjoy it and you learn from it. As always, you can find more podcasts from The Spoon at our website. Just Google The Spoon, you'll find us. We're usually the top result. Or you can find us at Apple Podcast or Spotify. All right, that's it for now. Let's get to my conversation with Jasmin. Hey, well, I'm really excited to be here with Jasmin Hume, who is the CEO and founder. Are you co-founder or founder of Shiru?
Founder.
Founder. Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me. This has been a company I've been watching pretty closely because it's an interesting concept. And I want to get a little bit into how you got to where you are. But I always like to kind of start the podcast so people have this context is, how do you describe your company when you're telling people at a party like what Shiru is? How do you describe it to just like an average, ordinary person?
Yeah, totally. What we do at Shiru is we make ingredients that basically make all kinds of plant-based products more delicious. So if you think about some of the big challenges you have today when you try a plant-based cheese, and that might be one of the hors d'oeuvres at the party that I'm at, talking to someone, where there's still performance gaps in terms of nutritional properties, taste, texture, and that's true for, the cheeses, but more broadly, alternative dairy products, alternative meat products. And so at Shiru, we make the ingredients that basically close those performance gaps and catalyze the transition to more sustainable plant-based eating.
Awesome. You actually went way further than like most people. You actually characterized the party you're at and what's on the plate there. So I think that's a great answer. You have an interesting background in that you have worked at some of the bigger companies. You work at Eat Just. I actually saw an interview with you there. So you've been at this for a while. How did you eventually decide to start your own company?
Yeah, it's a funny story. Indeed, I have been in the space for quite a while. So I'm not exactly a newbie to the alternative protein space. Truthfully, I knew that it was a big opportunity to be providing ingredients from a B2B perspective. So looking to sell ingredients to the, big major food CPG companies globally. And I thought that there was a lot of white space that was yet kind of to be discovered. I really wanted to work for this company, and it didn't exist. So
you went out and created the company.
Basically, I needed to go out and create the company, and now I work here, so it's all good. But really, that's what it was. I mean, I'm really motivated to use my energy in ways that are, I think, directed towards solving some of the biggest problems that I see, and climate change, loss of natural biodiversity as a result of how we're producing food today being a really, really big challenge. I thought if I can use my background and my skills in something that moves the dial there, then that's what I need to do. And I think the biggest impact way for me to do that was to build Shiru.
Yeah, I mean, Eat Just, right? One of the seminal early companies. But when you're that early, I think they go back 10 years now, at least, you have to kind of go fully vertically integrated in that. Like there's no one else out there. There wasn't a Shiru to say, hey, we need this interesting ingredient to build our plant-based egg or whatever. So as I think the industry evolves, we have companies like Shiru that are going to become critically important because that's just the way industries are. So it makes a lot of sense that as industry evolves, you decided to do this.
Yeah, I mean, one of the little known facts, I think, is that food CPG companies and include some of the new innovative ones like Eat Just, but also kind of the more traditional brands that we've known for decades and have grown up with, they do little to no ingredient development in-house themselves. And so when they are trying to innovate and create products that can compete with the products that are being put out by, Just or Impossible Foods or Oatly or, whoever, without innovative ingredients, it's really difficult to make products that meet the expectations that the consumer has. And so we look at that as a big opportunity to be able to, further more plant-based eating. And so that's really the foundation for why I started Shiru.
Yeah, if you look at traditional CPG, it seems like they employ a lot of guys in white, or a lot of women in white lab coats, but is the experimentation further towards the point of product creation, and they're not doing ingredient creation? They're actually saying, hey, I buy these ingredients from these companies and we're going to experiment with all these different recipes, but they're not building the core building blocks, is what you're saying.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly right. It's a question that we get asked frequently. Well, you guys are small. You're a new company. What makes you think that, you can create ingredients for some of the more traditional large companies? And that's exactly it. They do a lot of product development, a lot of innovation, but it really starts with ingredients that they source from other companies. They don't go far up enough, like in the value chain of saying, okay, well, we actually have this gap. So what's the ingredient need that we have? And can we create the ingredient ourselves? It's more looking at what the existing solutions are on the market and sourcing those as ingredients. But if you think about, the technical challenge in formulating like a plant-based cheese that can melt and stretch and have all those great qualities. The ingredients that people have relied on for a generation now, they're not cutting it. They're not going to necessarily fit the bill in terms of what we need. So they do a lot of innovation, but it's really kind of like farther down on the value chain. We're earlier, farther upstream. And we look at it as, we can do a lot of the hard science when it comes to like ingredient discovery and development, and then partner with the food companies that know how to do formulation, product marketing, distribution, sales, all of that. And it's a really nice complementary relationship.
So even if we propose the idea that the plant-based meat, plant-based food revolution is a disruptive force, will change the face of food as we know it, we still don't necessarily see the behavior of large CPG changing. They're still going to work with companies to provide them the ingredients. They're not going to do as much development themselves.
I don't think so on the ingredient side of things. I don't see a lot of it happening. And, when we talk to food CPG companies, they still look at us as a supplier of ingredients. We will be a supplier of ingredients to them, but we can do a lot more than that. You can throw your problems at us and say, well, we need something that is, soluble at low pH, that has high tolerance for salt. Give us all your specifics and we can make an ingredient solution that's exactly tailored for your need. We can even create custom solutions for our customers as well. So I think that there's still a lot of opportunity, and I don't really see them going and developing like those new ingredient technologies. But we're excited to be able to to close that gap and to provide those solutions ourselves.
We can jump into business models and how you work with CPGs more a little bit later, but I think I want to go back and talk a little bit about how you guys build your products. I mean, I've read a lot about you guys and the way you utilize ML, machine learning, and AI to build a giant database of ingredients. Talk a little bit about what you're doing. It's an interesting approach. There's a interesting cohort of companies that are starting to do this. You're one of the biggest names. Talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, at a high level, we look to what nature has to offer, and we recognize that the solutions that we've relied on for a long time, and functional proteins coming from animals, egg proteins, dairy proteins, collagen, they just represent a super small fraction of functional proteins that exist in nature. And so at Shiru, we've developed a very large database, more than 450 million natural protein sequences that come from plants, fungi, microorganisms, algae. And we look at that as our kind of diverse toolkit, if you will, of what can we find in the natural world that can perform as well, if not better, than some of the incumbent ingredients that have a negative effect on the environment overall. And so we use computational tools to be able to essentially mine that large database for diamonds in the rough, if you will, for really functional proteins that can behave in unique ways and that also are proteins that we can manufacture. Meaning we leverage biotechnology, we leverage fermentation to make our protein ingredients. And so if we find a protein sequence in nature and we think that it can be a really great replacement for a dairy protein, we can then pop it in a yeast organism and the yeast can make that ingredient for us in a really efficient way. We see this as being hugely transformational, both in terms of the products that we can support and the properties of those products, and then also definitely on the sustainability side. Like, there's no real reason that we need to continue to rely on ingredients from animals when we have other ways to produce things that are just as great.
I think I read an interview when you described your database as the first one that's connecting protein identity with protein-related function. Just talk about that. That you're essentially, you have all these attributes. You're saying this will provide this type of thing like flavor, smell, stretchability, etc. And then if someone comes to you and says, I want to build this product, or you internally say, I want to build a consumer-facing product, you can look through the database and say, hey, this is the best protein for that.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, you've done your homework. And we definitely say that we have built the only database that links protein identity with food-related functionality at scale, meaning that we can do this for millions of proteins. And so if you think about, we have to start with the product application always. And so to the extent that you can describe what an ingredient needs to do in a food product, and this is something that food scientists do every single day, you can understand, okay, the protein needs to gel and it needs to do that at, 75 degrees Celsius. That information is a starting point for us to be able to screen computationally, so in silico, and find solutions that, okay, these are the proteins that, based on their chemical attributes, and those are inherent to a protein's identity and related to a protein's structure, we predict that this group of proteins are going to be able to do the job in that food context. And then we can go and we can produce them. So we couple both the in silico or computational screening part of things with actual wet lab chemistry, where we're making a lot of proteins in really small quantities and testing them to make sure that they'll work in the given food application of interest. It's a really exciting approach that, we've been leveraging tools that others have created in other industries and then applying them towards food.
There's a couple other companies, I think Kingdom Supercultures is putting together a large database. I mean, I heard Notco talk about their AI or Giuseppe, and they did a joint venture with Kraft Heinz. Yep. How would you characterize yourself versus kind of others in this space that are doing similar things?
Yeah, totally. There are so many cool ways that companies today are using computational tools in food. I think it's still pretty new. Even if you go back probably more than 5 years, you'd find a lot fewer companies doing it. But it's really exciting to see the way that people are using it now. Definitely compared to Giuseppe and the approach by Notco, we're almost one step upstream of that. We use computation to actually find the ingredients. They use computational tools to take existing ingredients and understand how they can formulate them to make really great products.
They're building recipes.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yep. And in terms of Kingdom, I think that they're exploring all of the different ways that microbes can be used to create really unique textures and taste profiles, which, of course, just thinking about the number of microbes out there, definitely computational tools are gonna be really helpful for that. So again, a slightly different approach. Yeah. We're looking at specific biomolecule functionality.
So biomanufacturing, you guys use precision fermentation to ultimately produce ingredients, but you're different than like, say, a perfect day, right? You're not necessarily trying to do animal identical proteins. You're actually taking proteins that would occur naturally in nature and saying, hey, we want to scale these up, and we use bio manufacturing to produce these at scale.
Exactly right. Yeah. So I think, we have a lot of great reference points in the proteins that we've been used to consuming from animals, dairy proteins, egg proteins, what have you. And so there are a number of companies that are taking the approach of we're going to use those exact proteins and we're going to produce biomimics through fermentation. At Shiru, we've really cracked open more of what nature has to offer, because just like you can produce an egg protein, you can produce literally any other protein that nature has created. And so we're able to produce very, very pure, very functional ingredients that are from plants or mushrooms or microalgae, and we use precision fermentation to do that. So we look for functional parity, not necessarily, sequence parity when it comes to replacing an animal-based ingredient.
And that was a choice you made, and you've basically said this is what we want to do. What's the thinking behind that? Why wouldn't you want to mimic or do kind of sequence parity versus, and why are you sticking with functional parity?
Sure. So when you look at the function, first of all, it's all about the function, right? Like you're trying to solve a formulation challenge for food, and the person who's eating the plant-based yogurt at the end of the day doesn't care if the protein has the same sequence as a milk protein. They care that it's delicious and that it's nutritious. And so when you look for, functional equivalents, there are so many out there in nature that can be used to do the same thing in a food context. What we really focus on is finding ingredients that are able to be manufactured in a really scalable way. And so we know that some of the animal-based proteins, when you put them in, a fermentation system, a microbe, they don't always produce in high enough yields or express in the right format, or they're folding incorrectly. And oftentimes you have to throw a whole lot of resources behind trying to get them to be manufacturable. And so that can be strain engineering and optimization, fermentation, downstream processing, like lots of dedicated resources to make sure that you can scale those ingredients. At Shiru, we see that there's a large number of ingredients that we could make that are functional equivalents. And so instead of throwing a lot of resources trying to make one thing that is bioidentical, we say, well, there are thousands of things that could work the same way. So we're going to choose the ones that we can manufacture with the highest yields and that have the right functionality. And we evaluate that at the earliest stages. So we can go from, screening at a digital stage to having very small sample quantities that we've tested for hundreds of proteins in a number of months. And that's the unique aspect to our technology where, we're not a one ingredient company, we're an ingredients platform, and we aim to produce ingredients that are not just functional, but also amenable to manufacturing, meaning that we can sell them at the right price points.
It sounds more efficient and less cost hurdles in the way, because you're, like you said, you're not trying to I have to engineer this one identical casein protein. I'm going to look for this functionality, and this is the best one. And by the way, my data tells me that it's highly manufacturable in a biomanufacturing scenario. So it just sounds more efficient.
Right. And I would add, because you used the word engineer, and so I would add that because we are drawing from such a large database of naturally occurring proteins, we actually don't need to engineer any of our protein sequences, which is really interesting, because if you look at a collagen molecule and you say, okay, I want to make it stiffer or more flexible or what have you, you can use protein engineering to do all kinds of changes to the protein to have tailored function. In food, it's a little bit complicated because you still, with, producing ingredients this way, we have to go through the regulatory process. And so if you're now moving away from what nature has already given us, the regulatory hurdles, the consumer acceptance, these are challenges that we're going to have to deal with. And so at Shiru, we say, we don't do any protein engineering. We just rely on naturally occurring protein sequences. And we can do that because of the screening approach that we've developed. You've
described yourself as a B2B company, and you talked about how you can work with CPGs to find solutions, but it seems like also you're maybe going to develop your own ingredient products. Are you going to go so far as to actually develop consumer-facing products? Talk about the different ways you want to go to market.
Yeah, totally. So definitely we can support the food industry and also like large ingredients players by licensing some of our ingredient solutions to them. We also do intend to produce our own like ready to use ingredients and deliver them to food CPG companies. And so we're actually looking at launching our first product next year. And this is really exciting because not only can we use our platform to create ingredients via precision fermentation, but all of the learnings that we acquire by screening all these different plant proteins. We also have developed really unique insights on how we can leverage existing ingredients, reformulate them or adjust them in certain ways to really fill a lot of these performance gaps. And so that's what we've done with the product that we're going to release next year, which is super, super exciting. So I can't share too much detail about it.
Oh, you don't want to break news today? Come on.
Yeah, soon, very soon. But suffice it to say, it's a really big market opportunity, and we are using the insights from our platform to be able to deliver ingredients. Some of them delivering to the market as soon as next year, and so that's super exciting. So we can do that, and that would mean that we sell those ingredient products to food CPG companies, so folks that are doing the formulation, in which case we look more like a traditional ingredients supplier. At this point, we don't have any near-term plans to do consumer-facing food products ourselves. But the more development work that we do and the more, we grow our capabilities at Shiru, we have an amazing food science team that's developing product prototypes day in and day out to be able to test our ingredients. We get closer to having things that are really, really transformational on the product side too. And so we're going to look at that opportunistically. If there are opportunities where we see that we've created a prototype that's better than what anyone else has, that's something that we would definitely consider.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard from Perfect Day if that was in the original plans, but if you look at the model that they ultimately arrived at, they decided to do holding company that has consumer-facing products. Yep. And, originally they started more as a B2B play and platform play, and then they went down that path. So it does seem like as you evolve over time, there's always that opportunity.
I think it's an interesting one, and I think that the structure that they have employed to be able to do that makes a lot of sense, because keeping it all under one roof or like in one company, having both like a really deep tech play and then also being consumer facing can be really challenging for an early stage company. The resources that you need to devote to doing both of those things well are like not always overlapping. And it can create a lot of tension, I think, in terms of like an early stage food tech company or ingredients company. So having them be like separate entities, I can see that play working really, really well.
Yeah, they seem to have architected it and put a lot of thought into how they ultimately did it. And so you wrote a blog post, I think last week or so, about, you just, I think, came back from maternity leave. I think, congratulations. Your second?
Thank you. My second child. Yeah.
Yeah. And you've given a lot more thought to, breast milk, and you've called out some of the early and interesting players in the space, like BioMilk, for example, who are building interesting products. So coming back with that thought, are you guys thinking of maybe developing products for the formula market, for the breast milk market?
Yeah, it's a great question. We are looking at all kinds of different food products that would benefit from functional, sustainable protein ingredients. We're prioritizing application areas where we know that right out of the gate, we're going to be cost competitive. And so, thinking about the ingredients that are in infant formula today being largely, dairy-based proteins, that's pretty challenging, especially if you're thinking of replacing it on like a one-to-one basis. But there are maybe some components of infant formula that actually could command higher prices that are protein-based as well. And so these are definitely areas where we're exploring really like what the magic happens for us when we have a differentiated offering in terms of our ingredient solution, and we match that with a need in the application space where the price point's right. We really are able to add, value to the customer in terms of like the food companies that are purchasing the ingredients, and it fits with our goal of furthering more sustainable eating. So, if those are fits, then it's definitely something that we're going to go after. There are big opportunities in infant formula. And I think, generally the space needs a bit of refresh and innovation, as there hasn't been much of it, up until I would say maybe like 5 years ago.
I don't know if you guys aren't exactly an analog to Motif, but you guys are both B2B, precision fermentation oriented ingredient development companies. They have had their struggles. They've had to do some layoffs, and just looking at the broader space, what are your thoughts here? I mean, is that endemic to them, or do you think that the overall industry, are you seeing kind of headwinds for you guys?
It's tough. It's really tough. Generally speaking, we know that the headwinds are being felt by companies large and small and across all kinds of industries. So I can't necessarily say that it's something specific to food tech or to B2B ingredients. I don't think so. I think we actually have a lot of tailwinds, in fact. Particularly as the general public is becoming more and more aware of things like, supply chain issues throughout the food chain, effects of global warming, geopolitical instability that really affects our ability to have reliable food sources, especially with what's happening in Ukraine currently. So there are a lot of tailwinds that mean that innovative food solutions are desperately needed. The headwinds, I think, are being felt by companies across the board. So we're in that situation too. I mean, we're an early stage company and we're fueling growth through raising capital to be able to deliver, solutions to the marketplace very soon. And it's resulted in us really having a super, super keen focus on our commercialization efforts. I think what's really exciting about what we do as a business is because we're not specifically focused or waiting until we have a consumer-facing product, we can monetize today. So we can do that through licensing our technology, through partnering with ingredients businesses, and we're doing all of that to make sure that the growth of the business is really sustainable.
Yeah, it seems like a nimbleness of business model and having multiple ways to monetize through licensing, ingredient development is crucial. And you guys have already, it looks like you've deployed, I think you guys were talking about getting that pilot production plant up and running in 2022. It looks like you're sitting in it right now. So congratulations on that. So it sounds like you can get to monetization pretty quickly.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely a real focus for us. And so we've been moving really quickly. We're going to continue to focus on it and prioritize it. We definitely do have a pilot facility that we're getting up and running here in our headquarters in Alameda in California. And to accelerate while we get things up and running internally, we're also using CROs, so we use contract research partners, and also are partnering with some major global ingredients businesses to start the commercialization of some of our unique protein solutions as well.
Some of those big company relationships, I mean, we mentioned earlier Notco doing a JV with Kraft. I remember a couple of years back, IBM, I think, did a joint venture with McCormick, using their AI to help McCormick develop ingredients faster. Would you explore that type of deep relationship with a large ingredient company or even a CPG company?
Yeah, it's got to be the right fit. I mean, absolutely, yes. And the challenge in coming into the food space or food tech space with new business models is there's always a bit of education that you have to do, right? And so, folks in the drug discovery space, the pharmaceutical space, leveraging discovery capabilities and partnering with smaller startups to discover new molecules, that is their bread and butter. They're totally used to that. And for us, we think there's huge potential there. And it requires us finding the right partners who understand what the capability is and that we can reach the right agreement on what the milestones are for those types of collaborations. So, we're able to screen proteins, we're able to provide small samples, but if a company is we need minimum of 500 grams to even get started, that's going to be a lot more challenging for us. And so there are companies that it definitely works for, and it's finding the right match where the magic happens. So we see that being a lot of ingredients businesses, chemical businesses even around the world. A little bit harder as you go farther in the value chain in terms of like the traditional food CPG companies, particularly ones that don't have as sophisticated R&D or innovation teams. But this is definitely something that we're excited to do, and we know that our screening capabilities, both like on the computational side as well as on the wet chemistry side or ingredients development side of things, can be leveraged not only in food but also in other verticals as well, considering beauty, personal care, advanced materials, et cetera. And so we're really exploring those opportunities broadly.
It seems like a lot of your focus now is on the development of the ingredients, but not necessarily I don't think you're to the point, correct me if I'm wrong, where you're scaling them and producing them to where they're going to go in a large CPG company product. When you get to the point where you need to produce at scale, have you identified partners to fermentation partners? You know, there's a number of different companies out there kind of acting as service providers in that capacity. Yeah. The AB InBev, spin out. Are you working with any of these companies?
Yeah, not yet in terms of, scaling our own ingredients that we would take to end customers being food CPG companies, not today. However, we are scaling our ingredients through partnership with the companies that we're collaborating with. So we announced earlier this year a partnership with CP Kelco, which is a global producer of hydrocolloid ingredients, and fermentation is at the core of what they do. So we're currently scaling some of our protein solutions, which are replacements for methyl cellulose, with CP Kelco. And so that's really exciting. And we're also exploring, who the partners are that are going to be able to, enable us to scale our ingredient solutions ourselves.
So you're having those conversations and you're doing your homework.
We're having those conversations. Yeah, definitely.
Talk a little bit about, are your products ultimately going to be categorized as GMO? I know that's like a sensitive topic for some companies, but is that, what do you say to when you ask that question?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, as I understand it, labeling for GMO, it's not a requirement. However, the bioengineered label is the one that, comes into the foreground a lot in terms of discussion. Our products are protein ingredients. And so proteins as such are not organisms. And therefore we don't classify our products as being GMO in the sense that a protein is not an organism and therefore cannot be a genetically modified organism either. We look at GMOs as a really unique tool to be able to make more sustainable food. And so that's something that, it's a technology that can be used to transform the way people eat for the better, for the future of our planet. And so, it's a tool that's in our toolbox. Our products, we do not believe will need to be labeled as genetically modified organisms because they're not organisms.
Right. And yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's kind of gotten a bad rap. It's an amazing tool to help produce incredible products, but like when you ask them if that term is good or bad, oftentimes they'll just say it's bad. So, but yeah, it's not. Unfortunately, it's hard to get nuance across in labeling.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Well, Jasmin, this has been such a great conversation. I've really enjoyed learning more. Any kind of last thoughts or kind of things you're excited about as you look towards the next year or so?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm really excited for us to start to commercialize some of our ingredients that I talked about today. And next year is going to be a big year for us as we turn the corner from like an R&D heavy org to now one that's moving into commercialization. In general, though, like I'm really, really excited for all the innovation that's going on in this space. And we talked about some of the great companies, but truthfully, we probably need even more because food is such a big opportunity and it's such a big challenge that, I'm definitely of the mindset that the rising tide raises all the ships, and we're happy to be, riding that wave, so to say.
Awesome. Where can people find out more about you?
Shiru.com.
Pretty easy.
Shiru. Yeah.
That's pretty easy. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jasmin, for spending time with me today.
Thank you, Mike. This has been a pleasure. Thanks so much.
So that's it for today's show.
I'd like to thank Jasmin Hume of Shiru for coming on the podcast.
As always, the Spoon Podcast is hosted and produced by me, Michael Wolf. The podcast is a part of the Spoon Media Network, and if you'd like to connect with us, just head over to The Spoon, you know where we are, or drop us a line at podcast@thespoon.tech. And if you haven't already given us a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify, please do so. It's really helpful for us. All right, everyone, that's it for now. We'll talk to you next week.